All right, welcome back to the Inner Sanctum. We're a podcast digging into Kiss's unofficial archives.
That sometime became official.
At some time, it has become official, and I guess we can celebrate the fact that some of the stuff that we're used to referring to as bootlegs has become official. So I'm your host, Julian Gill. I'm back with Andrew. Andrew, what are we going to talk about this week?
Today on the Inner Sanctum, we're going to jump into the Kiss time machine, the Kiss DeLorean, if you will, and we're going to go back to November 30th, 1975, Largo, Maryland. Landover, Maryland. What's the actual name of this city?
I think it's Largo.
I don't think it's Largo. So looking at the actual newspaper ad that was toting, next Sunday, November 30th, 8 p.m., Kiss, Mott the Hoople, and Styx, it does say tickets available at the Capitol Center box office, Landover, Maryland. So there's a Largo, Florida, but there was never a Largo. I wonder where the Largo came from. Had to come from somewhere.
Yeah, I don't know. To be honest, it really doesn't matter to me that much. It's been referred to as both. It's confusing as hell, but we've generally, I guess, as Kiss fans, have settled on just calling it Largo because of the reference to the other shows, 76, 77, and 79 being the ones that matter the most.
And obviously, nobody get excited. We don't have the 1976 Rock and Roll Over Tour Largo show. We're speaking just about the November 30th, 1975 show, which after many, 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 many years is finally complete. This was one of those shows that when I first started trading tapes, I got this show on a compilation called Rare Bits and Pieces. And it was from my buddy Gary Danko at the Rainbow Rockatorium. So I got this show from him, and it was only the encores. It was the encores for years. And then I think soon after, it was taken off of the Rare Bits and Pieces compilation, and then it was put on something called Live Pieces, which would have been Houston 76, which at the time was incomplete, Largo 75, and then those incomplete Destroyer rehearsals. So all things that throughout the years that we've gotten complete versions of were initially all one thing called Live Pieces back in the tape trading days. The good old days when it was simple.
Ye oldie days of black and white and mono audio. Yeah, the encores obviously were the key part of this show that circulated for many fans for many years for whatever reason. And I simply didn't care about them. They were, with the overlays, they felt dated, they were weird, so disjointed when you've only got the tail end of a show rather than everything that leads up to that moment and the energy from which it starts. It was always cool to see a live in color because at the time, there wasn't for me anyway, there wasn't a tremendous amount of material to choose from. You had some of the Kobo 76 stuff from the same tour, and you kind of had Largo. And I think there was some 8mm stuff from December as well. Waterbury circulated long ago. At least the fire breathing clip. I remember that in really poor quality. So it was kind of fun to take these separate things and kind of see the difference in energy between those Largo encores and, say, one of the Kobo shows is palpable to me anyway. Interesting show, interesting time. And I think historically it's important to set the stage for November the 30th. There's a couple of little factoids around that date. Kiss Alive had not been certified yet. But I'm going to guess that the label would have had a good idea about how shipments were going of the album by that time. At the time of this show, Alive had rocketed up the Billboard charts, but it hadn't hit the top 10 yet. So that would be the following week. And then the live version of Rock and Roll All Night, which was the single culled from the album, was only just starting to gain traction on the airwaves. in North America, and it had only just entered the top 40 at number 38. So the album is, and this show is really on the cusp
Mhm.
of the stardom that the band were about to attain. And I think that's what makes it a really interesting piece of history.
I think what makes it interesting too is we go back and we look at their first headlining arena show at Cobo Hall, May 15th, 1970. Excuse me, May 16th, 1975. This is kind of that first run of arena shows that they were actually doing as headliners. So this is, I think, this was the first time they were in Largo, Maryland, as a headliner at the Capitol Center. So this is still one of those you're seeing the band evolve at every single show. And another interesting fact among bootleg collectors, this was at the time that this came out, when whatever it was in the late 80s, early 90s, the encores. This piece of footage was the earliest piece of pro shot color footage that we saw of Kiss at that time. Well, in concert footage rather. Because I mean, think about what we had prior to that. We had January 31st, 1975, Winterland, that was black and white, and then later on, we had Cobo Hall, January 1976. So this November 75 show was the earliest color pro shot Kiss footage that was being unofficially traded. So I just think that that's interesting. You mentioned 8mm stuff, but I'm just talking about like professional shot stuff.
Oh, yeah,
So,
absolutely. And there's a world of difference between this and, say, any sort of 8mm footage that was
mhm,
shot by fans on those little handhelds that
mhm,
were kind of popular back in the day. But this was also a massive show for them.
mhm,
22,000 fans attended this show. I mean, it was absolutely massive for a group which, reviewers criticized as being nobodies. They were trying to
mhm,
figure out how these three groups, because it was a triple bill with Mott
mhm.
and Styx,
Sticks.
were pulling in that sort of audience in, and it was Largo, Maryland, not Landover, for whatever the difference is. Um, and they couldn't figure it out. And this venue, thankfully, this venue was the first, I believe, North American sports facility to have an in-house video projection screen
Mhm,
for the sporting scoreboard,
mhm,
and that was also utilized by groups. Where are my notes on this? It opened in December 1973, and the Who played, I think, a couple of days after the very first sporting event there.
mhm.
This show again had 22,000 fans using festival seating, so that just meant a free for all
Free for all, yeah.
rather than reserved seating. So it's a very cool venue. It's very historic in numerous ways, and it's because of a venue like this that we have so many videos. And there's Aerosmith 76 from here.
Mhm,
I think there's Blue Oyster Cult filmed here. There's another Aerosmith from the 80s from this venue, all because of this in-house video system that they had the foresight to put in.
mhm, 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 mhm. Another really interesting part that I thought was pretty interesting when this came out. We know that the encores, they circulated for many, 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 many years, but we never saw any evidence that the full show actually circulated from this. What I mean by that is we knew that the complete show of Largo 77 existed. We obviously saw Rock and Roll Night and Shout Out Loud from Dick Clark Golden Greats. But if you were really an Eagle Eye fan like I was at the time, if you watched the original compilation video, there's a couple shots of Largo 77 in there too. Even the reunion press clip that we talked about on a previous episode in Tiger Stadium, that Rock and Roll Night edit, there's clips of Houston and Largo 77 within that. Even further, if you're watching the Farewell Tour mini documentary, which ended up being pushed into Do You Love Me, there's shots of Largo 77 in there as well. But up until the full show came out, which was, I believe, in 2022, nobody ever saw anything other than those silly 3 encores, which I thought was just fascinating because it's like, well, maybe they just didn't save anything else. Maybe this is all that survived. So we just thought that for years and years that it just didn't exist anywhere. But yeah, to our surprise, the full show was out there, and we got to enjoy the full show almost 2 years ago now. So I just thought that was interesting that we never saw, not even a screenshot, nothing from the main section of the show until the whole thing came out.
Yeah, for me, this show coming out has been one of the most exciting Kiss Live. I hate saying leaks, but that's what it is in essence. Over the
Julian
past
Kissy
decade,
Leaks.
Kissy leaks.
Kissy
Yeah.
Leaks. Kissy Leaks.
Yeah, and again, I got this in October 2020, audio only,
Mm-hmm.
the full show, and at that time I put it on continuous repeat. I was absolutely blown away. It wasn't just the new car smell. There was something special about this once you had the full thing. And I said it earlier that when we had the encores, they lack context
Mm-hmm.
that sets up how the band gets to that stage in the set, sounding the way they do and explaining why the audio sounds the way that it does. Take
Mm-hmm.
away the visuals. And again, as an audio guy who can't spend an hour or 90 minutes, or back then 75, listening to shows, audio has always been my go-to. So being catered to, the audio version of this, it was just a revelation. My jaw was on the floor when I first pressed play, and just to hear the power. It's not a great recording, audio wise, by any stretch of the imagination, but the power, the intent, the purpose is all there. And then fast forward a couple of years to when you're able to see the video of it, I was like, okay, well, now you could see the actions of the actors married with the sound, and I was blown away freshly.
How did you feel? Because I know you did this. How did you feel when you looked at the waveform for the audio that you got in 2020 to the waveform of the video, and you realized it was exactly the same? How did you
Uh,
feel?
and you son of a bitch. No, it was no shock. Again, catered to. When there's a person who likes audio rather than video, um, and in the background, these offers come up sometimes to be able to obtain something. Obtainium. It's the most valuable commodity to the collector.
Mm-hmm.
We all want to add more obtainium to our collections.
Absolutely.
So mine, I would not have gone for a video version with probably the price of admission back then. And again, it wasn't offered. So I thought it was only audio, and I didn't really look at the waveform from that perspective. I didn't analyze it to see that it was a video sourced audio file. I just pressed played and enjoyed the living shit out of it. It was only later that I'm like, oh, does this match up? Oh, look at that. It's a video sourced file. Oh, blah, blah. Ha ha ha. It didn't matter.
Mm-hmm.
I got to hear it and I got to enjoy it. And then later on, a lot more people got to see it and hear it and enjoy it. And, that's what it is about being a Kiss fan. You keep your word when you obtain something. And then later, someone doesn't keep their word and everyone gets to enjoy it. And it's the way of the world. Come on, let's be realistic.
It is. I almost wonder, because I like I mentioned on a previous episode, I didn't really start trading until 1998, and there was so much available by that time. So I sort of wonder what was the what were traders doing? What were they keeping back versus what was actually out there? Like, was Cobalt Hall Night 2 76? Maybe that was not for trade at some point in time. Could it have been? Maybe. I don't know. Or did it just all of a sudden flood because of stuff like Confidential and Exposed and things like that? I don't know, because I wasn't around. And then if someone was around by then, put it in the comments. Let us know if at one point so much stuff was uncirculating. I'll tell you, and we may or may not do an episode on this show in particular, but I remember when Roosevelt Stadium leaked for the very first time. And remembering that was incomplete. The first 3 songs were gone from it. And then I also remember when Detroit 77 leaked. And you wonder how long were those shows in the pipeline for other collectors before they leaked? Was it long? Was it not long? I mean, I know that there was some nefarious things going on with that Detroit 77 show, but at the same time, how long was someone holding on to that before they leaked out? Nobody knows. But I just remember being online, and it was probably I know Cobo Hall 77, that was in 2005 that leaked. I think Jersey City was maybe 2001, 2002, around there. It had to be around there because the Lost Concert came out in 2003. And by the time the Lost Concert DVD came out, which was a shorter version of Jersey City, the other version had already been out for a year or two at that point. But you wonder how long someone held on to them before it started leaking out ultimately. Um, for this show in particular, I had people calling me after the Creatures Fest in May of 2022. People telling me that someone handed me Largo 75, and I was like, "Oh, cool, enjoy the encores." And they're like, "No, no, no, it's the full show," and I was like, "No, it's not. It's not." And then I found out that it was, but I never found out who is the one that brought it in, or who was even handing it out at the time. I never found out. Doesn't really matter, to be honest with you. Um, but I had multiple friends call me up and ask me if I had it. At the time, I did have it. It was one of those things where like it was given to me and I was asked not to share it, and that probably was in summer of 2021 is when I obtained it. It's either summer of 21. That had to be when I got it. Summer of 21. But I was told not to do anything with it, so I didn't. I kept it. I sat on it for all that time. But then the Creatures Fest thing happened, and people said it was being literally handed out. So I mean, you were at Creatures Fest. Nobody handed it to you.
I wasn't at Creatures Fest. I got texted that night
No.
that hey, is this show out? I'm like, I didn't even know that it was a video at that time. You got to remember, and while I had the audio in 2020,
Mm-hmm.
I didn't see the video until it actually hit YouTube
Mm,
uh, at that time. And
that's
I
interesting.
downloaded that fucker as fast as possible. I did not see the video before anyone else. So I thought it was hilarious. I was like, holy shit, though. Again, it was something before I heard the other, I hadn't heard an inkling about it.
Mm-hmm.
So again, that's part of the excitement for me because, over the years, you do hear a lot of things when you're involved in the trading world. You hear about things
Yes.
that exist that are not known to exist publicly.
Mm-hmm.
Again, you keep your word in these matters. Um, and
You
then
have
it
to. You have
becomes
to.
your word is all you've got. And obviously it's difficult sometimes because while things are done not for trade, and there's a lot of that in both the audio only world and the video world's even worse. But the audio world, shit does get out. It's happened. People make mistakes, honest and otherwise.
Mm-hmm.
People make side deals, and then side deals become it's just the way of the world. Whenever there is something that someone has paid for or obtained that has the nuance of rarity attached to it, and the possibility for some to make money, then you know your normal rules of the trade don't exist. You're operating on a different set of rules,
Mm-hmm.
and there's the good and the bad. Sometimes you take your lumps, and it's always better to not be the one dealing them out.
That's very true. That's very true. I can honestly say with all certainty, I've never used trading of Inner Sanctum recordings for profit. I always had a job. So I make my money at my job, and I never was making money to try. And I was never selling videos to pay my mortgage. I was never that. So, but take that for what it is. I mean, here's the thing. It was the Wild West in the 90s. You can go to any convention and videos are being sold openly. I was talking to a friend the other day. There's Kiss bootlegs for sale on Amazon right now. That never happened
Yeah.
before. Is that because the barn door is open? Is that because, we don't really know what Pop House is or isn't going to do, or Gene or Paul maybe not watching The Nest anymore? I mean, who knows? It's
They're totally not watching the nest. That's more than apparent with the amount of intellectual. I've had to skirt a careful path with what I've done. People
Mhm,
might be pointing at the screen, saying, "You're guilty. You're guilty." I've skirted a very fine line
mhm,
between the acceptable use of material
mhm,
and getting spanked. And yeah, I've had a couple of run-ins where I have been spanked on
mhm,
IP, and have made mistakes. But there's a wholesale lack of protection of the Kiss brand at the moment. And it's showing up on Amazon, it's showing up on eBay, it's showing up on various places that now that the brand has been sold, it's almost like they don't give a damn. And the new parties that own it don't necessarily care about all aspects of it. And we talk about the devaluation of brand value.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's going to bite them hard because, again, the more the seam split and water escapes, the harder it is going to be for them to stop the flow. And it's just blatant, whether it's photos, whether it's, again, audio and video property. The last time I sold something, it was to Universal.
Hmm.
That shit went back where it belongs, into their hands as
Mm-hmm.
the owners, without any doubt whatsoever of what it was. Um, that now you see these little schmucks on eBay selling some pretty low quality shit. It's devaluing the brand.
It's all low quality. I mean, there was a guy, I think he's all but done now, but there was a guy on Facebook that you would put something out, he'd rip it off YouTube or wherever and then sell it and say it was, oh my God, it's the master. And then when no one bought it, he would cry poverty. I'm like,
And sell his hard drives.
yeah, I just don't understand. I just don't
Going
understand.
out of business, buy my hard drives again.
Going out of business, buy my masters, buy my hard drive. I just don't get that. But like I mentioned, it was a different game in the 90s. I mean, I mentioned him before, but my friend Gary Danko from the Rainbow Rocket Tour, I would just walk into his store. It was just like a regular retail store, and he would have bootlegs there for sale. And I think that's the only thing I ever bought from Gary was Kiss bootlegs. Because that's what I wanted. That's what I went to his store for. That's where you got it. You know? I know for sure that if Gary was still around in 2022, he would have been selling Largo 75 and no one would have thought about it. It was times have changed, and as things become easier to obtain, people try and get it to you faster, and they try to be greedy about it. When this show showed up on YouTube, just literally out of the blue, I was amazed. I was amazed that it happened. I was amazed that this was out there for everybody to see, and yeah, it was something that says this is something else is coming. This is the floodgates are about to open, so you better hold on tight. So
But was there anything that came after that, from your perspective, that went anywhere near the excitement? You remember when Largo 75 hit YouTube, the uproar it caused of amazement and enjoyment and passion and
Mhm.
excitement. I mean, it was like when Van Halen Donington 84 hit
That's right.
YouTube. It just absolutely blew up. And you saw just, the fans who don't play the game just enjoying the living shit out of it for what it represents to them from the band that they love and the music that they care about that is central. And that was so refreshing. Everything that kind of followed afterwards, to me, never ever got near that high bar again
One
of
one
what
other thing
Largo
did. One other thing did. It was
was.
the Cobalt Hall 75, just because of the history of that show. Even though that was
See,
only it was
yeah.
incomplete, but for me seeing that show, I was like, holy shit, this is they're creating Kiss Alive right now, right in front of us. So to me, that was just as interesting as that. But you're right. As far as those two little things, nothing else came close. Nothing else, not even close.
And if we were to do it today, it would take something like the, a Creatures Pro Shot
Oh yeah.
or Japan 78 to do it for the fans again on that same sort of level. I don't think there's anything that could possibly exist or be thought to possibly exist. Largo 76, I guarantee you this, it's not going to, if Kiss's show from that tour exists, it's not going to be half as exciting as people hope it would be. The colors are going to be like the Aerosmith show that was shot at a similar time, or Blue Oyster Cult, which circulates that you're able to see. It's going to be closer to Houston 76 than to anything as exciting. So,
I think if any of the two missing Winterland shows ever came out, that would be just as exciting. So, and I guess we'll talk about them at a later show, but those are, I guess, known or thought to be lost for many, many, many years. There's because it's so funny too. Like if you look on YouTube, the tubes from June 1st, 1975 from Winterland is there. Well, where's Kiss? They were the headliners that night. So it's bizarre to me that that doesn't exist. Or maybe it was actually really lost in a fire. I don't know. I don't know. But I think if either one of those shows came out, what's that?
So there's a lot of misinformation out
Yeah.
there.
Yeah, but I think if either one of those two shows showed up on YouTube, people would go nuts.
Oh,
Because
people go nuts. Yeah.
people go nuts because these early shows, you're seeing the band evolve night after night after night. Once you get to the Destroyer tour, which there was a thread about this on the Kiss FAQ saying, when did, Kiss become Kissco? And my answer is always Destroyer. That's when, Glickman Marks came in and streamlined everything and they had a production versus just a band being on stage. So I think any other show from pre-Destroyer is always going to garner more excitement than anything else because you're watching the band evolved. You're watching the band evolve.
That's the real, as a guy who wasn't old enough to be there, as a guy who wasn't even a fan until the mid 80s,
Mm-hmm.
that's the real Kiss. I recognize that more and more with each passing day whenever I dig out an old show to listen to or to see if I can run it through any of the new toys available to try and improve it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that is it. And again, coming back to Largo,
Mm-hmm.
um, that you see the power, you feel the power, you see the hunger. And once they become a professional group with Glickman Marks, with advisors, and they start looking at revenue streams and bottom lines, and they get rid of all the old guys, and just bring in stringers, basically hired to work rather than family. I mean, it happens to all groups.
Mm-hmm.
Aerosmith, again, is a great example of the same being applied to their crew as what happened with Kiss's original road crew.
Mm-hmm.
It's completely transformational. And then once you have Beth as a hit single, Kiss as Kiss is over. It's a different Kiss.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a Kiss that we love because you still have Super Kiss of 77, 78. You still have Vegas Kiss. And then you have the Fat Elvis era Kiss.
And how long is when does the Fat Elvis era start? That's what I guess the answer is always going to change when the Fat Elvis era starts.
Depends on people's perspectives.
Depends on people. Exactly. I agree. But yeah, this is the real Kiss. And here's the thing: we're not going to get into arguments of Eric and Tommy and Bruce and Eric. I don't want to get in any arguments, any of that crap, because I like all eras of the band. Some I like more than others, but this was still Kiss. This was still Kiss. So we touched on our feelings when we first saw the show. We touched on how the show came out, how it came to be. It's great that everybody was able to see this show. It really was. I don't know if it was actually ever available on that Japanese website that was around for a while that we talk about so much. Since I had this show, I didn't have to go out and purchase it later on, as I did with the other shows, like the Japan 77 shows. But I'm sure it was.
We all had this show. I mean, it was a great equalizer for a lot of us.
Mm-hmm.
On the FAQ, we often see messages about hoarders and the elites, and this was the equalizer. All of a sudden, everyone had it. So I didn't have to. Well, I bought the audio. Okay, idiot. If I'd been patient, I would have. Could have just had it anyway, but you never knew any of that was going to happen.
You never knew if any of this stuff, if you were ever going to see it again, if it was ever going to be available again. There was always a sense of urgency when you realized that something that you hadn't heard was out there, or you went to someone's house that you knew and they were letting you listen to something that you'd never heard before. There was always like a sense of urgency of that.
Well, isn't that cool when someone says, "Hey, come here, I want to play you something."
Mm-hmm.
It's not about lording it over someone who hasn't heard it or may not hear it. It's that we are that excited to get to hear it ourselves, whether we're paying for the early access, as I always say,
Mm-hmm.
or whether we're giving a treat to friends. And come on, I've done that for people. I did that one time at an expo. I plugged my phone into the soundboard and started playing a few things, and for the most part, no one freaking noticed whatsoever. It's like, here's some Creature soundboards that you've never heard, and everyone's like, "Oh, play I Was Made for Loving You," you know.
Well, don't you
And
remember
these,
at the Kiss Cruise pre-party we played those Dynasty soundboards, and the organizers of the event were like, "Hey guys, this doesn't sound very good. Can we put on something else?" And nobody. These were like big Kiss fans that paid a lot of money to go on the Kiss Cruise, and they had no idea they were listening to soundboard recordings from the Dynasty tour. They had no idea, and it made me laugh. It really did. It really did. It made me laugh, and it made me realize that there is such a small percentage of fans like us that collect this stuff like us.
yeah, we really do have an extra chromosome or something wrong with our DNA.
Or isn't it one less? Either we have one less or one more.
Whichever. There's something fundamentally wrong with us. We are really a special, in not the good sense of the word.
Mm-mm. Mm-mm. There's definitely, we definitely. I mean, it was funny. I mean, I think a couple weeks ago, I was organizing some stuff in iTunes, and I accidentally clicked on, like, instead of like artist, I clicked on song, and I think I had like 250 versions of Rock and Roll All Night in my iTunes library. And I was like, why is there so okay? Because all the live concerts and stuff in there, and all the, the compilations and the box sets, and it's out of control. It's out of control. And I always skip over that song. Always, always, always.
Get a Life Incorporated.
That's us. That's us.
Literally.
Yeah, yeah. We're still like hounding, like, ooh, what can we find, or what's out there? It's still fun. It's still fun to listen to something that you never heard. And watching Largo 75 for the first time kind of brought me back to those original shows that I was seeing for the first time. Like when I originally sat down in 1998 and saw Houston 77, or the very first show that I saw, which was New York City 1975. I mean, no, New York City 1977. I'm sorry. It took me back to that level of excitement, that I was seeing something for the very first time, and it was cool. I think, especially my generation, maybe the generations after me, once Kiss put out Extreme Close Up, Exposed, Confidential, and very much so Kiss My Ass, once they put out those VHS tapes that gave you a taste of what was out there, you no longer could go into something completely fresh and completely new, because you had seen a little piece of it already. So, and all those shows on all those tapes, were out there, but this one wasn't. You got to wonder why. You got to wonder why that Kiss deemed that we're not using this for whatever. It's so funny to me.
Well, I think we know why, and we'll talk about it when we go through the songs of why it may have been deemed unusable, much like many of the other archival recordings. They are imperfect. None of these are release quality out of the box in what we're talking about. Other shows that we've spoken about, Sydney 1980 had a lot of work done in order to make it commercially viable as a product. Even Rock the Nation Live is another good example of a product that had work done to it in order to make it saleable, even for modern Kiss. Tiger Stadium, unusable live. Largo 79, unusable live, commercially. So all of them have problems, but none of them really should be discarded in the way that they have been by the group, the band, the business, because they all have commercial potential in a different framing than, say, trying to release something like Alive again, because it's not. And the Off the Soundboard
What color?
series.
What color Alive vinyl we're releasing next?
Ugh.
Haven't they done? So, but yeah, you hit the nail on the head, because the Off the Soundboard series was so exciting because it was new. We hadn't heard any of that stuff before. My favorite Off the Soundboard was Tokyo 2001, because it was such a huge upgrade over what we had been listening to for 20 years.
We had it. So technically it wasn't an upgrade in any, it wasn't new.
Mm-hmm.
Let's put it that way. But the difference in audio fidelity between what we had been listening to, and I've still got one of the CDs from Farewell Tokyo, I think it was the bootleg was called, was just garbage. It had been captured, I think, from the web stream,
Mm-hmm.
or some such. What details don't really matter. And then we get the off the soundboard, and it was stunning, absolutely spectacular.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah, that might be a show that we talk about on a future episode of Inner Sanctum, because that show is so cool. It's my favorite reunion era show.
Or Des Moines is another good example. We had the
Yeah.
audience bootleg of that 1977 Alive 2 tour show, but the audience recording was missing part that only became apparent when we got the off the soundboard version.
Right.
And while the soundboard is indicative, it's not a great soundboard. And come on,
No,
it's a monitor mix.
it came from a cassette.
Um, yeah, it came from a cassette, and that tour, other soundboards from that tour sound similar in terms of the fidelity, and they're not the greatest recordings, but it's a damn good, it's Alive to Alive.
Mm-hmm.
Cool
Mm-hmm.
to me. And it was a soundboard that I didn't know existed, and it was a vast improvement on the audience, and it had a holy shit moment of, wow, didn't know that was there.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Man, I hope that series continues at some point. So
Oh,
it was
I
so
am jonesing. It's been how long since the last one?
over a year. I mean, I think it was April of 23 is when the Poughkeepsie show 84 came out.
Another
So
good example, Poughkeepsie, Mark St. John, live with Kiss. Who
mhm.
would have thunk? We had some crappy audience recordings. I mean, there were upgrades that came out over the years as, people did the due diligence and worked their way back up generationally. So you got one that was adequate at best. But then you hear the difference between that and a soundboard.
Oh
And
yeah,
again,
no, no,
a guy who was in the group, as long as a fart takes to dissipate, and there's a soundboard with him.
I resemble that. Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's it's stuff like this that makes liking this band exciting. Because let's remember, we're 7 months after the final Kiss performance, and this is how the band is going to live on. So let's hope that somebody does something with something and releases something at some point to us. Because I'm sick. I'm sick of buying fucking Dynasty mirrors. So it's plastic. I haven't
Yeah.
bought it yet, but probably gonna, to be honest with you.
It's all still happening. There's still new discoveries being made. We're waiting for the group to get back, or the business to get back to doing what the old business has been doing, and who knows how that aligns. And I hate sounding like a wannabe business person, because I'm not a business guy. Um, but the discoveries are still being made. Who knows what's going to happen to those things?
Mm-hmm.
Some of the things that are being uncovered are certainly in the Universal Vault. Some things that are being discovered are certainly not in the fucking vault. And some of those things may have been part of the Universal deal, may not have been. Who the hell knows at this point?
Mm-hmm.
The whole thing that now is that there's nothing
Mm-hmm.
except stuff like Largo 75 to keep us excited.
Mm-hmm.
And, look how animated we've gotten talking about the passion for the music and the
The
video.
passion for collecting. So yeah, I mean, I used to love going to my friend's house, a couple nights a week and just ordering a cheeseburger deluxe and watching Kiss videos. I mean, that was fun to me. The most fun I ever had, my friend Bill May, he lives in Brooklyn, New York. He had so many tapes from the 80s that he either taped off TV or made his own compilations, and he just would forget what was on them. And then what we would do, we would pop on a tape and he'd be like, "Oh, I wonder what clip is going to be next." And maybe it was something rare, maybe it was Land of Hype and Glory, but you didn't know. That was the first time I ever saw that news clip from the Palladium 1980, that little Eyewitness News clip where you see like a tiny bit of Detroit Rock City. But I was like, "Oh my god, this is the first time, this was Eric Carr's first show." So that was cool to see that for the very first time. So I always loved seeing something that I never saw before. And I gotta tell you, back to 2021 when I first saw Largo 75, I was like, oh my god, this is so cool. I think I think we became spoiled because when this show came out, you no longer had to chase down low generation VHS copies anymore. You were never getting 5th generation copies anymore. Anything that was coming to you was a file that was on a hard drive or a DVD, and there was literally no quality loss when you were copying DVDs. So unless you knew someone who was in, you were always getting low quality VHS tapes. Hell, I mean, I haven't even. I have to look at it just because I'm curious as to what it looks like. But I have my original New York City 77 VHS. I wonder if it's probably like 4th generation VHS. Nothing near what's out now. But you sort of lose that with the shows now because there is no quality loss when you're sharing these shows anymore. I mean, unless you're sharing really a low fidelity file, but virtually no quality loss if you're just copying DVDs.
Yeah, and there's literally no search for a marginally better generation of video. There's no searching for a marginally better generation of audio. The best has already been filtered by collectors like us,
Mm-hmm.
um, through the decades, and a lot of others. Come on, I'm not going to even say that I'm anything compared to the efforts some people have made in terms of tracking down the very best quality. But that's the mission, and that remains the mission, and it's addictive. I mean, it's still, when you buy a reel, just as an example, to take that into the studio and sit there on proper gear
And
as
listen,
that shit plays through the studio monitors, or to run a 24 track in and to sit there with an engineer and do a mix,
it's cool
bringing
stuff.
bringing it to life for the first time in decades. And in some cases, it's stuff that no one's ever heard, and
Mhm.
you're sitting there going, "Holy shit, holy shit!" I mean, it's a couple of years ago now that we took a 2-inch into a studio here, to do the transfer on. And we're sitting there, we're going through the faders, and it's like, where's the fucking bass? There's no bass. That's a guitar track, guitar track, guitar track, guitar track.
Cool.
It's like crack, and I have no idea what crack is like, but it's a highly addictive substance, and this is the best analogy that I can come for something that's addictive. Just to have that feeling of, oh my god, you never have that feeling again when it's second playback is not the same as the first.
No, not at all. Not at all. I remember like the first time I saw some of these shows, like the first time I saw Tokyo 77, or the first time I saw, I don't know, first time I saw Largo 79. I was like, oh my God, I'm seeing this stuff come to life, because at the time I'd only had seen pictures, because when I was collecting, there was obviously no YouTube or anything like that. So, but getting something like this that virtually you never saw a frame of, and now there it is, it's delivered on your doorstep. Here it is. Just click one button and it's yours. Is incredible. It's absolutely incredible that that's how trading has morphed into, I'm no longer sending a money order and then waiting for a tape to get to me. I literally just click a button and there it is.
Hoping that a tape gets to you.
Yeah. Yeah. Hope. I mean, you know what? I've been very lucky. I can't remember ever being screwed over buying tapes. I think I bought a really crappy copy of Anaheim 76, and the guy felt bad and sent me Winterland 75. So I really don't remember ever being screwed over by a tape trader, luckily. So,
Yeah, I had one where I bought a reel of something and it totally was not, or got some cassettes, and some of them were not what was inside the J marked on the J cards. But that's the risk of what I do. So
it always is a risk. So,
those are the things that I accept that other people won't accept. They're the sort of people who go into McDonald's, and if there's not a 3 pickles on their burger, they're taking it back and demanding. That's a different transaction. When you're in the rare audio gig, you take your lumps.
yeah, I mean, I purchased a Betacam SP tape that said Kiss Tiger Stadium on it, and somehow it was like war movie footage. Now, here's the thing. I need to get that retransferred because I still don't believe that that's what's on the tape. I don't believe it. I think the guy that transferred for me just was not great. So, and I think that because he transferred something else for me and didn't rewind the damn tape. So, it always is a risk in doing anything like this. So, let's get back to this meat and potatoes of this show. Let's talk about Largo 75. Just as a heads up on this, The version that I ended up watching for the show didn't have the encores, and I sort of forgot that the encores were there. So I don't really have much to say to the 3 encores when we get to Cold Gin, Rock and Roll Night, Let Me Go Rock and Roll. I probably haven't watched that in 20 years, maybe more. But the version that I watched just was the main show.
I rolled my eyes at the encores. It's like, oh,
Yeah.
not this shit again.
Yeah, and what's apparent, because like I skimmed through the encores at one point, didn't watch them, maybe 2 years ago, and there's a clear quality difference between the main show and the encores. The encores look like they maybe originated from like a U-matic tape, and the main show seems like it may have came from like a 1 or 2 inch tape. So at least to my eyes, you could tell. And we'll talk about this on a later episode of a show, but I believe it's the encores of Cobalt Hall Night 3 that are absolutely from a VHS, versus the main part of the show is clearly a master source, either a 1 or 2 inch tape. So I think something like that's going on here. I think the encores didn't come from the same place as the main part of the show, which just adds more questions. Like, how did that even happen? What's going, like, nobody took care of this stuff. Nobody did. We take care of it, but nobody else did.
No one else cares, but we care.
We do care. So when you pop in this show for the very first time, it says, what's the title card say? It's like Kiss, Mott, Sticks, and it looks like the old typeface
Asterix.
the old typeface that was on your parents' VHS camera for home movies, where it said title date, Jason's birthday party, or Tommy's graduation. That old style font is the first thing that you see when you start up this show, and I thought that was cool. I was glad that whomever captured the show saved that, because I love little things like that. I really do.
And it's really dated. Here's something just for kind of tech nerds. It was very difficult to do overlays on video. We're going to talk about a lot of the effects as we go through it, but even titling like that wasn't that easy back in the day until computers came along. And it only became easier in the late 70s, early 80s, when you had 8-bit computers able to sync 2 video sources to put video overlays on, that it started to gain, outside of the high-end commercial studios, which you'd get.
Yeah. And
you should know that. You're a video guy.
Well, but remember too, I wasn't editing before computers. I think there was a Go video deck in my first video class, and I think the dust on it was like 2 inches. My first day in cinematography class, they sat me in front of Adobe Premiere Pro. That was in 2001 or 2002. I've always edited on a computer system, always. So I never had to do it the old way. Thank God. I never had to. I mean, now, and it's funny, we're sitting here, we're purchasing these little decks and capturing all these old VHS tapes that we have. That's just how it was done back then. 2 VCRs, and you were hoping to get everything together. But yeah, I always was in computers. I was in computers.
Well, when we moved to America, I'm sorry, another tangent. We bought a stereo from Sears, and it actually came with a splicing kit.
That's so cool.
For 8 tracks and cassette tapes. I mean, that's how different things are now from back then. Back then, you were expected to resplice your own audio and video media. Nowadays, you either throw it away or it's done in a click of a, finger.
It's a lost art.
Sickening.
Syncing audio still isn't a lost art. I mean, that's something I spent a full year with the original sync of The Greatest Show on Earth. A full year, 365 days I spent the very first time doing that. So it was torturous.
All right, Largo 75.
Yeah. All right, so that title screen is the first thing you see, and then we jump right into Deuce. I first of all, throughout the show, and I just want to say this up front, I think the show, it sounds better during Deuce and the Strutter maybe, and then as it gets later on in the show, it's just all bassy and distant and sounds very, very muffled. However, where the cameras are placed, it looks like there's only two cameras, one on each side of the stage. Those looking at those close-ups and seeing like, oh my god, like look at Gene, and just seeing that, I thought that was just absolutely fantastic. Getting that close to that guy singing Deuce in November '75, incredible, just incredible.
Yep. So Deuce kicks off, and I'm just going to read my notes
Yeah.
because, again, a lot of they're going to follow a similar theme throughout. But everyone knows, and if you didn't, "Deuce" is my song. "Deuce" is probably the first Kiss song I ever heard, even though I didn't know who Kiss was or what the hell the song was. That's it. It's my jam. If I hear that in concert, I'm happy. But the power and the controlled fury of the opening song on this performance is palpable. It
Mm-hmm.
just, the expressions on these guys' face at the start of the show is just, there's so much determination and intent. Superlatives don't do them justice. It's just amazing. The power and the fury of Kiss 75 and before is just encapsulated in this show so perfectly from this song.
Right off the bat, we're hit with just some lame graphics. It's right
Yeah.
off the bat. You see the stupid cover of the booklet of Kiss Alive, which was a new record at the time. And then like you're seeing like there's a bad rotoscoping job of the Hotter Than Hell record. They're taking out the blacks and fading in and doing all this nonsense. And you're seeing like the first album, just all these silly overlays of blinking Kiss logos, like you're having a seizure. But when there isn't those silly graphics, you're like, wow, this looks cool. Look at how crystal clear those close-ups are when Paul and Gene are singing, Deuce and Strutter. It's so cool. I watched that and I was like, I can't believe I'm watching this. I'm noticing like little things about the costumes and Paul getting on his knees at the end of the song, and I'm noticing like Gene is wearing a different choker than what he normally wears with this costume, like because the cameras they're right there, they're right up on him. So I really wish that there would have been a version of this show without those silly overlays. I really wish.
I
But
was screaming at the overlays. It's like, get out of the way. You're blocking the choreography sequence.
and it's throughout the whole show. And when they're not doing these silly little overlays, they're using like, they're cranking up the colors and making everything look neon. And I was like, what's that? Can you imagine being there at this show and looking up at the screens on either side of the stage and seeing that nonsense going on? The stroke-inducing nonsense going on, seizure-inducing nonsense going on each side of the stage. I'd be like, what the fuck is going on there?
I really don't think too many of the 22,000 would have cared with a little bit of, medicine.
Okay, maybe, but there's still some guy.
It was 1975. There was probably a lot of dope smoke, a lot of alcohol smuggled in, and it was a rock and roll party. I mean, literally and figuratively, that comes across.
Yeah, but I mean,
and it would have been new back then too. It wouldn't be cheesy back then because it was new. They didn't have anything to measure it against, Andrew. You're measuring it against your life experience, which only has better Avatar style. Sorry, I said Avatar. Bad choice of words. It's more James Cameron Avatar, not the other Avatar.
Yeah. Even going back to when the first time I saw this show was probably the first time I saw the Encores was in '99, and seeing those, I'm like, what's up with these lame graphics now? But I still hold true. I still think somebody in the crowd, maybe it would have been like 2% of the crowd, maybe like 11 people in the 20,000 were probably like, what the fuck's going on there? Who's sitting there and blinking?
All right, which KISS FAQ board members were those?
But there had to have been, I had the same reaction when I was watching them do that, the silly camera change during the Mike Douglas show when they performed Firehouse, and the guy just switching the two cameras back and forth, just like he's up probably on some medicines at that point in time. So it's the same thing. I'm like, man, it's just stuff's just so lame looking. And you wonder if someone thought it was lame back then. Maybe when Kiss rewatched this and they saw all this stuff, they were like, this sucks. Maybe they did. Maybe they thought that it sucked. And that's why it was never used for anything ever. Ever.
Nope. Okay, Strutter. I actually like some of the video effects during Strutter. So
No.
I
No.
do. I think they actually work with the vibe of the song, but the close-ups of Gene's bass and Peter thrashing the living shit out of his kick are
Yeah.
just fantastic. Peter is just he is a machine back then. All
He
those fills
Mhm.
and the bass lines that Gene's playing. I mean, this again is going to be a recurring theme throughout. But Strutter and Deuce. I mean, that's the first two songs on Live, isn't it? Um, just a powerhouse, totally different animals, those songs. And to see them, it just transforms them.
I'm just going to mention this because we haven't mentioned it yet. But if you're looking, if you're noticing things that's going on in the video, you'll notice that the alive quote unquote alive drums that Peter used, which weren't used on the alive recording, those are the drums that he used in Cobalt Hall 76. These aren't those drums. These are just regular silver drums. These were before he got his disco ball drums. So he probably got those in early 1976 or late 1975. But at this point in time, he wasn't playing those mirror ball drums that became synonymous with the Dress to Kill Alive tour. He's just not playing those. He's playing just regular silver drums, um, which is interesting because you're wondering like how many times did these guys change instruments or anything like that? How many times did they go through different things? So I'm just scanning through another video clip or two that I have from 1975. I can't. So I just opened up Waterbury. I couldn't really see anything there as far as what Peter's drums were, but um, and I can't see it because it's an 8mm shot, but he may have had the mirror ball drums New Year's Eve 75, 76.
Nassau?
Yeah, NASA. He may have had. It's just difficult to see, but certainly here he doesn't have those disco ball drums, and he has them um, in Detroit 76, January 76. So that was something I noticed because you get really cool shots of Peter. Finally, you get shots of Peter, which he was absent in some of these early videos sometimes. So when he wasn't at there, those things weren't absent here. I
He's all
wonder,
over this video.
yeah, I wonder if I have any pictures of the 75 shows because now I'm curious. Now I'm like, when did he actually get the mirror ball drums? I'm curious. Let's see. So this would have been November. So my folders, it goes from November 9th, 75, and then my next folder is February 76. That's unfortunate. Anyway, that was just a tangent that I had, just noticing the actual drums that Peter was playing. So, but yes, on to Come On and Love Me.
Bass is where it's at here. Gene, and again, it's audio
Mhm.
because audio hits me first. Gene's bass lines here are just so in your face. You can actually hear what he's playing clearly, and the interplay with Peter, it's just fantastic. This is where the audio starts to shift.
Mm-hmm. And you wonder what was causing the audio shift. Is this the mix that they were hearing on stage, or is this the mix that they were hearing in the house? Because I can't imagine this being a monitor mix because all I hear is fucking bass. And
This
typically,
is
like when I used to play live, there'd be no bass in the monitors because I was feeling that bass because it was just always so fucking loud.
there's no guitars.
Hmm.
You can
So
barely hear the vocals. The guitars are way down. Um, I think something got knocked.
it's possible, but I don't believe that the amps on stage were fake yet. I think they were actually live guitar cabinets on stage. So it's possible that as a front of house engineer, you're getting not only you're getting blasted with the mains from the PA, which is going to be like your vocals, your drums, and whatever's mic'd, you're also getting blasted from whatever speakers are on stage. So I believe that those guitar cabs were still live at this point in time. I believe.
Well, how many did they have? Because it looked like they only had
No,
two stacks on the
was
right, one for Ace, one for Paul, and then one on the left, which is Gene.
So I think it was a total of 5 stacks, and I don't know how that 5 full stacks. So you're talking about 10 speaker cabinets, I
Mhm.
believe, or maybe because the original Kiss stage it was 3 stacks of Marshalls, three
Yep.
full stacks, and then by the time they get to the Alive era, it was up to 5 full stacks of
I don't know.
Marshalls.
I'll have to pull I've got a wiring diagram for the 75 stage.
Mhm.
Um, I, I've never really looked at it that closely, but again, you're playing a really large facility here. This is one of the larger ones for this tour. So maybe the front of house engineer is trying to make adjustments on the fly
Mhm.
for the volume, because even if they've sound checked, it's going to change
Once there's people in there.
once there's meat in the seat. That's going to change the dynamics audio wise. So they may have just made an adjustment to sound better over the PA, and it's affected this audio. Or again, something could get knocked. Who the hell knows? 50 years ago, we're not going to figure it out.
Yeah, 50 years ago. Yeah, it's yeah, because there's no multi-tracks for this. The previous shows that we've reviewed, we had mentioned that Anaheim was mixed live by Eddie Kramer. So at some point there were multi-tracks for that one. And same thing with Tokyo 77. There were multi-tracks recording all that stuff. That's probably not the case here.
Yeah, it's definitely 2-inch tape for Anaheim. There's definitely at least quarter-inch mix down, which suggests that there's 2-inch for Budokan.
Hmm.
Um, who the hell else knows? I mean, but for a monitor mix like this, you're going to have a
Hmm.
single stream, and it won't have been recorded to very high-end gear, more than likely.
No,
And it,
no.
again, it's in-house.
In-house, yeah. So we move on to Hotter Than Hell. Still always my favorite song and also my favorite solo too. Unfortunately, you can't really hear the solo that great here, but you could feel the band's energy at this point. And you could you're still seeing just those silly Alive booklet photos just and there's that one just stagnant shot of Peter. And this is the first song where we actually get some shots of the audience.
Hmm.
Which I always kind of like seeing, just because it's to let you know it's like a you know a place and time when you're seeing the crowd. Kiss always looks timeless because that makeup was the same as it was in 75, as it was in 96. So when you're seeing the crowd, you're like, oh, that's what people looked like back then. There's actual people there. So I always found that interesting.
But it doesn't really capture the scale.
No,
I mean,
and even the stage
when you're talking
is small.
22,000, the stage looks small. The audience looks tiny. I mean, it's really weird when you think about it.
I think too here, and I don't have any wide pictures of this, but I think the PA was on the ground versus when they came back for Love Gun and then Dynasty, they flew the PA in the air. So they were going from left to right on that stage, especially the bigger Dynasty stage. I think for here, the PA is on the ground and there's only that little spot in the middle left for the stage. That's what I believe. But I don't have any wide pictures of it. I said they didn't fly the PA on many shows of this tour.
Yeah, I've just pulled the attendance figures for the tour,
Mm-hmm.
and obviously this show is 22,000. Immediately prior to that, 7,000, 8,300. Evansville, 11,000. Chicago, 10,000. Terre Haute, 10,000. And then 4,000, 5,000, 3,000,
Mm-hmm.
7,500, 2,600 Arlington, 3,000. So this really is an outlier in scale for the period, which is very interesting. Hotter Than Hell has one of the best visual sequences for me. And at the beginning of the song, it's dark, and Paul comes strutting out of the darkness with the candelabra in the background. And when I was watching this, that just struck me as cooler than shit.
Mm-hmm.
Um, the audio is still really bass drums heavy,
Oh, it's gonna get worse.
but during the song, the lighting transforms into amber, kind of an allusion to the flames of Hot, Hot, Hotter Than Hell. And there's some great close up shots of Paul and Gene, but you wouldn't think the other two guys are in the group during this song.
So it's always been Paul and Gene.
Foreshadowing.
It's always been Paul and Gene. Um, Coming up next is Firehouse. I think it's kind of more the same in there. You have this rich yellow and red and orange lighting, and you have more and more lame effects.
No,
Um,
they're not. The tongue flame effects are awesome.
I think that's supposed to be fire.
Yeah, well, tongue flame. There you go.
Yeah,
Fire.
yeah.
Couldn't decide. I'm a tongue. I'm a flame. I'm a tongue. I'm a flame.
I think it looks like they borrowed that from Looney Tunes at the time, and then that's what it looks like. And then it's just like, and then they're focused on the bass drum, and then it's just, I don't know why. And we talked about this on a previous show where they can never get the shot of the flame right, and it's just the whole thing is weird for me. And those that silly effect at the end of the song, and what's even funnier too is if you watch these reunion tour shows where there was Tiger Stadium or even New York City '96. They got a stupid flame effect on the screen then too. I'm like, why are we using these awful effects on the screen? We just want to see the band. So yeah, this song loses it for me because the sound is really being impacted here, and then those little silly flame looking things. I was just like, ugh, so bad,
Oh,
so bad.
I disagree slightly. I thought they did a good job framing Gene's flame sequence,
It was
but
almost
at the
cut off
begin,
by the little things.
I know, but at least it's all centered. Even if it's there, they captured it. At the beginning of the song, though, there's a great interplay between drums and guitar. Peter banging away on the intro and Ace riffing,
Mhm.
and you get some good camera work. Again, I don't know how cued in they were, but they seem to be pretty well cued in on the camera work on the most important elements, and they seem to do a good job of capturing it. And this is early days for
Mhm.
videography. So at the beginning of the song, and Firehouse has never been one of my favorites. I thought it was pretty well presented visually, and I'm okay with those overlays, even if you don't like them. I'm a little bit older than you, so you just roll your eyes, old timer.
Yeah, I'm just like, man, I'm just like, just get rid of them. So then we got She, where the asterisk kiss logo makes another appearance during She, and that ruins the song for me a little bit. But yeah, it's just every time something's going good and I'm looking at the band, I'm like, wow, this is so cool. Then like something silly comes on the screen. I'm like, oh man, when am I gonna see the band again? Maybe this song, maybe next song. I don't know.
Yeah, I've really soured on this song over recent years. I just find it so plodding now. But I love the absinthe lighting, the green, and the angle on Gene and Paul is badass.
Hmm.
But you can see from this performance how a reviewer in 1975 could have been watching this group and come up with a line like "mood music" if you're in the mood for destruction, from watching this performance, this song in particular. But it strikes me that they're throwing everything into this performance of this slow song. I find the asterisk artwork overlays kind of endearing, being of that age. But I love watching Ace's face when he's playing the jam section of this song, and the fretwork. Again, the close-ups I just think are absolutely killer. Really good solo camera work as well, even if his gimmicks kind of flop. I mean, the little pop fizzle at the end of his guitar at the end of that. I mean, it's just like, and the barely present smoke bomb. Lame.
This is the first time I really noticed that the band is playing to the cameras. There's like a shot of Gene where he's like really, really
Mm.
playing to the camera. I noticed that for the first time, even though I'm sure it was all throughout the performance because these cameras were giant on either side of the stage, so that they were probably looking at those the whole time. This is the first time I just kind of noticed it, especially in that purplish lighting that was in there. So I thought that was cool. And then we moved to the first quote unquote rare song, Ladies in Waiting.
It's money visually and in terms of having a quality of recording of the song live. I actually think the sonics of this work really well for this song, even though it's on Detroit. It's like it's a completely different beast with this
Yeah,
mix.
I've always kind of liked this song. It was one of those songs where I thought that it was something special for Detroit because I thought, they did the first night of Detroit and they realized it didn't work, and then they never were going to do it again. I had no idea that it was in the set, 2 months earlier. So it seems to me that this was on constant rotation on the, Dress to Kill Alive tour before it was dropped in favor of Parasite. Because here's the other thing too, like we don't have set lists for every single song for these shows. So we only have certain set lists, so we can only wager a guess as to how often Ladies in Waiting was there versus Parasite.
Yeah, I think that's one thing that we're going to find more and more as, more details about these shows continue to be kind of discovered, that there was a lot more variation in sets. So exactly like you say, I thought Ladies in Waiting was special from Detroit.
Mm-hmm. Me too.
To have it here, it's like, wow, okay, so it's been performed elsewhere, but this is a really cool performance as well. And who knows what we're going to find in the coming years that they may have thrown into set. Some things are rumored, Strange Ways, Coming Home. Maybe one day that evidence will also surface.
I just want to see them open the show with Rock Bottom. That would be so cool to see.
Oh, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That'd be so cool to see. So cool to
Jeez.
see. Yeah. So next up is Nothing to Lose, which is Peter Criss's first, I guess, vocal performance here. I think this is shot really well. I don't recall ever seeing a shot of Peter throughout this whole damn song.
This one is terrible visually.
Yeah, I don't recall.
Musically, it's badass.
Mm-hmm.
But just limit the amount of acid that your cameraman takes.
Is it the cameraman that's taking the acid, or is the editor taking acid? Who's taking? Or are they both taking acid? They're everybody taking acid.
Either or, but at least they got some good shots of the audience again.
That's right. I was just going to mention that. It's like there's the audience, and it's under the same like reddish lighting. Because Kiss, they weren't flying any trussing underneath them. All the lighting was from those little trees, and then whatever spotlights they had from the other side of the arena. There was no. The Rock and Roll Overture was the first tour where they were flying actual trusses above the stage, behind the stage, and in front of the stage. Because even the Destroyer stage, they just had those giant high tension wires, the whatever they were called. That's where the lighting came from. There was no front or back trussing of lighting. So these are just from those couple trees. I think there was like 4 trees in the back and 2 in the front. I think that was it.
Yeah, and again, when you watch various shows by different groups performed at Largo 75, 76, there's a universal theme in the lighting. So how much of it is in-house versus what the bands were bringing in with them? Because again, that color palette of kind of the bluish green and the amber red is universal for the time period.
Isn't there a Fleetwood Mac? There's no Fleetwood Mac from this.
There's a Fleetwood Mac. I think there's a Who.
No. I think there's no Journey, right? I don't think there's a Journey from this time, but I think I have the Fleetwood Mac one.
I wouldn't know. There's one concert site that does have quite a few of the videos that were filmed linked in it. I can't remember the name of it. Is it concertarchive.com, I think.
Previously called Wolfgang's Vault. I
don't know.
I was a member, and then the amount of emails they sent me bordered on harassment. It was
Sirius XM level, huh?
Oh my god, it was insanity. And then I remember I finally unsubscribed, and just the level of it was out of control.
Wolfgang's had some good shit though.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. 100,000 Years. This bass solo, able to see Gene up close like this, spitting blood, I thought was so cool. I think this version of the blood spitting, because it's so up close, is my favorite pre-Love Gun blood spitting. There's not a ton of blood here too, but you see that shot of him, right as the song starts. I was just like, oh my god, so cool. So cool.
You can see why they had to magnify the effect, though, because how visible would that blood effect have been to the audience? I mean, it's really tiny.
Yeah, and it's almost the same in Winterland 75, where he's drooling much more of it instead of it getting on him. Like, it didn't get on him really until Love Gun, and then there was so much more blood during Dynasty. And it even looks a little more it looks thicker here too. But yeah, you're right. They had to magnify it and make that guy more of a mess.
Yeah, but here's where I noticed that Paul was playing to the camera. It's finally here that I say, now we get Paul's eyebrows when he's looking at the camera, raising his doing his facial expressions. He's not doing that for the audience because they ain't seeing shit.
You ain't
He's
seeing
doing that for the cameras.
You ain't seeing shit. And then here, and I'm gonna say this jokingly, but here during the drum solo is where we got the laser effect from Kiss Meets the Phantom when Abner was shooting the the talisman. You get that silly line where, because it's like two shots of Peter, there's like a close shot and a not so close shot, and you get to see that silly line in the middle. I'm like, oh God, please just put me out of my misery. I can't watch this anymore. It's so bad, these effects. It Because I thought Peter was playing great. I just think that the effects, they just ruin a great performance. And then I don't see the flames, and there's like these little like clouds of like, what's, guys, like, this must have been something they bought like that day and like, guys, we're gonna fuck around with this tonight, like it's gonna be fun, we're gonna have fun, we're gonna fuck around with this. And I just it's the end of 100,000 years. That's possibly the worst thing visually on this show. 110%.
Yeah, so 100,000 years. I'm like, my takeaways from this are there's nothing quite like Gene's pre-destroyer blood shtick,
Yeah.
where
And
he's doing it
those
almost like
leapfrog
it.
chunks, those leapfrog
Yeah,
jumps.
he's doing it almost like his life depends on it and delivering a believability.
Mm-hmm.
There's way too much echo audio wise. The overlays suck, but then you get to the drum solo and Peter's face is just, I mean, that guy
He is just
is
going
playing.
for it.
He is playing as if his life depended on it. Um, and that's all the cameras give us, basically a close-up of his face until it splits to the cross screen. The preacher section is so muted you can barely hear it, but the flames during the crescendos,
Mm-hmm.
they are, I mean, you're seeing that alive stage come to life
Mm-hmm.
again in front of your eyes and it's not
Mm-hmm.
staged, it's live, it's real. Even with the badly timed or positioned overlays, I'm really glad that we've got angles like this to bitch about, to nitpick over, and to disassemble.
And I noticed here, and this continues on to the next song, which is Black Diamond, where his makeup is starting to come off too. You see like some skin on this part, and then on his nose too. You see the makeup starting to come off. They hadn't really perfected how to keep it on for the whole night just yet.
Yeah, and my notes on this one were, again, you look at Peter and you see his expression, and my immediate thought was, no wonder a lot of guys who played music live night after night on tours like this had a hard time coming down after the show and had to look for alternatives.
Mm-hmm.
It explains so much. You see the energy and the passion in the moment. How do you recenter yourself after that?
After that,
Yeah, it really is an amazing dynamic, and that again was my thought. And the overlays just really ruin this one, though. It detracts, but at least you still feel the power of the song and the performance through the music.
mm-hmm. And then
Helps to
we're
be an
gonna,
audio guy.
yeah, and then we move on to Black Diamond, where you finally get some pyro. And we talked about this on earlier shows, how there really wasn't a ton of pyro in these shows, as there was in the reunion tour. So I think there's some weird effect going on, like some looks like a TV screen. I don't know. I thought the drums going up, because there's no wide shots. There's nothing for us to see as far as the drums going up. But I just thought like the effects here, I thought they took away from the end of the song.
Yeah, well, I said my bit on Black Diamond.
Mm-hmm. And again, you see his makeup coming off again, and you see he's going for it at this point in time. He's going for it. So good performance, just doesn't sound good.
Yeah,
sadly. So and then
ask
here we
for a
go.
refund.
As for, yeah, okay, I'll make sure to do that. So then here we go. So then we move into the encores, and as I mentioned before, the encores a little bit grainier, definitely coming from a different source than the rest of the show. And
Yeah, and I still like, the roadies on
Mhm,
stage, Peter coming out from behind the kit, them
mhm,
thanking the people who had the cheap seats behind the stage.
mhm.
So clearly they well, it was all oversold. I mean, it set a record at the venue, with the 22,000, and now you know why, because there are people right up behind the
People
stage
in the back,
watching,
right?
and it's really nice. And again, it's nothing new to us, but I never guessed I'd be as impacted by this show as a whole as I am versus the decades that we had just these encores. I mean, these are almost like whatever. We have to just say something about them, because they're part of it.
They're part of it.
When we've been getting pretty excited about, either things that detract or add to the rest of it. It's kind of weird. Typical Kiss
Um,
fan dynamic.
we mentioned when we were talking about New York City '77 that the encores circulated first of that, but there wasn't such a long gap between the encores versus the rest of the show. In my opinion, I believe it was like the early '80s where we got the encores for New York City '77, and then it was maybe 5 years later that you got the whole show. I mean, this if these encores came out around the exposed era or even the extreme close up era, because there is some of this cold gin is on extreme close up. Um, Even if it was then, understand that the encores came out in like 30 years almost passed between getting the full show. I don't believe any other show was like that ever.
Worth the wait.
Yeah, worth the wait for sure. Because, like I said, you're seeing the band evolve. So the encores finish up the same way as the other Dress to Kill live shows: Cold Gin, Rock and Roll Night, Let Me Go Rock and Roll, and you actually see the confetti and the guitar smash during Let Me Go Rock and Roll, which people always thought was Rock and Roll Night, but it's actually Let Me Go Rock and Roll.
Yeah, and during Rock and Roll All Night, there's a nice close up of a banner in the audience of
Yes,
the first. That's really cool.
yes,
Someone had that good a banner of the first. I think it's the first album artwork.
yes.
Um, yeah, that's stuff I love.
Me
Just
too. What happened to
I
that
never
banner?
really registered. Yeah,
What happened to that banner?
it's
Probably in the
available.
trash the next night.
Yeah,
Probably in the
add
trash.
it to your collection.
Listen, I love that Tiger Stadium banner. If that Tiger Stadium banner hadn't made it in the Shout Out Loud video, I wouldn't have wanted it. But because it's in the Shout Out Loud video, I knew I had to have it.
No,
I knew I had
totally
to have
get
it.
that.
I knew I had to have it. So, so what are your final thoughts on Largo, Maryland, 1975?
I think I've said it. It's something that amazes me of how good it is, as imperfect as it is.
Mhm,
And as a collector, as someone who's enjoyed bootlegs for, decades, it's a reminder that not everything has to be perfect to be unbelievable and blow your mind.
mhm,
And this was one of those moments in time that blew my mind, first with the audio and then when the video came out, because again, we'd had a taste of it, and
mhm.
I never
Oh,
thought that the whole thing would be as good, um, or better in some ways than those last three songs that just became kind of irrelevant to a certain extent to me.
mhm, mhm. I think I bought a tape at one point where, because initially the first night of Cobo Hall '76 didn't have the encores, so I think I bought a version of that where it was Cobo Hall '76 and the encores of Largo '75. So it was like, ooh, it kind of is a full show, but not really. So that was put on the same tape at some point. I wonder if I still have that. Probably not, because it's been replaced so many times. But for me, I've said it a couple times here. The coolest thing about this show is you're seeing the band evolve, and I'm always down to watch any early show, even if there's no set list surprises or anything happening. I love to watch this band become the band that we saw in December of 2023. Mm-hmm. This is the evolution of this band. So again, I'm Andrew Scambatti. That's Julian Gill. We hope you come back to the Inner Sanctum next time. See you then.